everybody. So one of the things I like about cruising is sitting in the evening in the cool breeze in a quiet anchorage, and we sit around the cockpit and we do a lot of talking and we tell a lot of stories, and we really enjoy being here with other people too, and unfortunately it's just us right now. But it's one of the nice things about cruising and living on a boat is this. I don't always like passages. Passages are a lot of work. But once you get there and you're in a harbor, that's when it's really nice and it's peaceful. It's almost like sitting on your porch in the summertime. So we're going to tell more stories. And I'm going to tell another story about Sea Frog, our first boat. And I think that in a lot of ways, these stories are good for people that have never cruised or never owned a boat before, so that you can realize what it's like, and it's really wonderful. But there's also things that we did wrong because of our inexperience that are good lessons. So one of the things that I do when we meet new people, I try and get as many stories from them as I can. We've met people that have been around the world. We've met people that have been around the Horn, that have been around the Cape of Good Hope in Africa. We've met people that have weathered hurricanes on their boats at sea. There's a lot of amazing information out there, and a lot of really cool people that you bump into when you're cruising. There's people that have got a lot of money, and there's people that have absolutely nothing. There's people with nice boats that don't know how to sail. There's people with trashy little boats that have taken those trashy little boats around the world, and you would never know it. It's amazing what a well-founded boat can do. And so back to Sea Frog though. So the last time I ended with my first attempt at heaving to, and it worked really, really well. And we weathered that storm just fine, and when the storm was over, we continued sailing. When we left Charleston, we thought that we were going to be in Beaufort in 3 days. That was our thought. And it ended up being a lot longer than we thought it was going to be. When we got about to Myrtle Beach area, right, it was early morning, and we had just come through a rather rough patch, and we were kind of tired, and I was trying to stay somewhat coastal, and I didn't realize how deep it was or wasn't. And so all of a sudden the boat hit something and it bumped. I was like, what was that? And then it did it again. I was like, oh my gosh. And then I realized a little too late that we were actually in the surf. And every time we'd get a trough in the surf, it would hit the bottom. And let me tell you, once you get in the surf, it's very hard to get out of the surf. It keeps wanting to push you closer to land, almost no matter what you do. Even with the engine running, it was really hard to get out of that surf. And it was really scary because we kept getting closer and closer to land. And pretty soon, we were really close, like dangerously close, and the surf started getting bigger. Probably, and it was, like I say, it was after a storm. And so the surf that we were in was probably 6 or 7 foot waves. Not really exceptionally large, but enough that when you're talking about surf and hitting the sandy bottom, I was sure that we were going to run hard aground, and then the surf was going to tip the boat over sideways. And when you're going directly against the surf or directly with the surf, it's one thing, but when you try and turn, now you're going sideways to the surf. And so you go up and down, and you rolled sideways, and the boat rolls pretty dramatically sideways, especially when your keel hits the bottom. And then the wave hits you, right? So you're in the trough, keel hits the bottom, next wave comes, pushes you sideways, and you're trying to You know, if the surf's coming from this way, you're trying to get the boat turned around back into the surf so you can get out. And then once you finally do get turned around so your nose is into the waves, now the waves will crash over the bow when you're on the bottom. And then as the as the boat lifts up, as the wave kind of goes underneath you, you have to gun the motor to get to the next one, and then you hit the bottom again, and then you gun the motor again. So every time that the wave lifts you out, you have to push as hard as you can to get over to the next one. So we got stuck in the surf, and I'll say it probably took us a half hour to get out of that surf. And no matter how hard we tried, those waves kept pushing us back. It was one of these, you know, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, the entire time until we got out of the surf. It was pretty scary. I was sure we were going to lose the boat. And what really was the reason? Well, number one, we didn't have good charts. All we had was paper charts. And like I said, we were operating with a sextant. I wasn't really sure exactly where we were. I knew we were roughly in the vicinity of Myrtle Beach, but I really didn't know exactly where we were. And in best of times with the sextant, I could only fix us maybe within about 10 kilometers. That was about as close as I could get. I wasn't very good with a sextant. When you're way out at sea, it's not a big deal if you're 10 kilometers here, 10 kilometers there. It doesn't matter. Heck, you can be 20 miles off, and it doesn't really significantly affect things. But when you're close to land, it affects things a lot. And there's certain areas where the continental shelf comes out quite a long way, and sometimes the beach comes out a long ways too. And so I just wasn't paying enough attention. I thought everything was fine. I could see the land. It was fairly far away, and I wasn't worried about it until all of a sudden I hit the bottom. And when I hit the bottom, I realized how shallow it was. Then I realized that I was in surf and I wasn't actually in just waves. I thought they were just waves from the storm. And well, they were, but with that shallow water, it turns into surf. And it can be hard to get out of. So, this last time when we were coming south, for the first time on our shakedown cruise on Grace, I was really, really nervous about getting too close to land. And if you want to stay out of the Gulf Stream, because we're heading south, right, then at that point in Florida, you have to be really close to land. And so many times I was, you know, a half mile from land, and it made me really, really nervous. Of course, now I have really good charts. We have really good depth sounders. You know, our depth sounder was not that good on Sea Frog. It was the original depth sounder to the boat. It was one of the things I didn't replace, and it was on a little display on the cabin, so it was quite a ways away, and I really didn't pay that much attention to it unless we were on the Intercoastal or something. I definitely wasn't looking at it when I thought I was a mile offshore, and I was probably a lot closer than a mile offshore. The shoreline can look really, really different, and you can't always tell how close you are because you don't have a context for how big things are. You see trees, but you don't know how big the trees are. You know, you see buildings, that gives you some kind of a hint because you say, oh, that's a 4-story building. Well, that gives you a hint. But if there's not a big building right there, you don't necessarily know how close you are. You don't know if those are 100-foot trees or 20-foot trees when you're looking at them from, you know, a half mile offshore.
Something that kind of tipped me off for how close we were, for long points of time after we got around Frying Pan Shoals or
Right.
through, I had no phone signal.
Right.
So when and in my experience, it is easier to maintain a phone signal than to regain a phone signal.
Right.
So when I regain a phone signal, that tells us just how close we were to land.
Yep. That's kind of a newfangled way of doing things, I suppose. So, anyway, so we got caught in the surf. And we got caught in the surf because of inexperience, because of not good charts, you know. And how do you avoid that situation? Well, have good charts, really, and study your route ahead of time and pay attention to where you are. But if you do get in the surf, it can be very, very dangerous. So try and avoid that at all costs. I guess that's it for now. The cat left, so I have to go get the cat again. Oh, well, Lila left, so I guess I gotta go get Lila again. See y'all later. Hey folks, like, subscribe, tell your friends. It really does help, and it helps the channel grow. It helps us get higher in the search engines. And if you do feel like you can, please donate and help us out on the journey and help us restore this boat. We have a Patreon link. We also have a PayPal link on our website.